Hello and welcome to Global Eye. 2020 was the year when COVID-19 wreaked havoc across the globe, claiming 1.7 million lives and close to 79 million people fell ill due to the coronavirus. It was a year which disrupted supply chains, shipping lines and severely impacted economic activity across the world. It was a year when India lived up to its reputation as the pharmacy of the world by supplying medicines to 150 countries. While the world realized the dangers of being import-dependent on China and China plus one became the buzzword for India, there was one incident which will impact all foreign policy decisions going forward. On 15th June, 20 Indian soldiers were killed in the worst clashes between India and China in 45 years. For the last 8 months, Indian and Chinese troops are in a face-off position at eastern Ladakh. Despite 8 rounds of military talks and a 5-point consensus reached between Foreign Ministers Subramaniam Jaishankar and Wang Yi in September, there is no end to the border standoff. India has made it clear that China must restore the status quo and it can no longer be business as usual with China. Going forward, India would like to play a bigger role in supply chains, forge win-win trade partnerships, challenging proposition and focus on the Indo-Pacific. In fact, Minister Jaishankar recently said that India would be giving its fullest attention to the Indo-Pacific, an area which constitutes 50% of global trade, 64% of the world's population and 62% of global GDP. So how will India navigate global challenges in 2021? To discuss that and more about India's priorities, we're joined by 2 former foreign secretaries, Mr. Shashank and Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. We also have with us former Indian ambassador to Canada and South Korea, Mr. Vishnu Prakash. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador Shashank, if I can begin with you, this was a year when India and China would have commemorated 70 years of diplomatic relations. There were 70 events planned to celebrate these 70 years. These celebrations are yet to take off. Do you think India would be well advised to formally call off these celebrations as a message to China?
Well, it's a great pity that when the Narendra Modi government took charge in the first instance, they invited Pakistan leadership. They wanted neighborhood first policy. That was given a rude jolt. Secondly, we welcomed Xi Jinping to India, and we were hoping that things will improve with China. Now, Chinese have given jolt not only of the COVID, but also of killing those 20 Indian brave soldiers, despite the fact that China wanted to, professing improved relations with India. So I think that was a great shock to us. Thirdly, we found that the Americans were going in for America First policy on their own, abandoning many of their allies and trading partners. So India also had to do something likewise in order to look after its interests and to try to build up ties with the Americans where they had gone. So I think that 2021 may have changes in those policy approaches. We'll have to just wait and see.
Right. Ambassador Sibal, if I can ask you about India-China relations in 2021. India is asking for full restoration of status quo ante. China has given 5 different explanations about the border standoff and the reason why it has sent troops in lakhs to the India-China border. Can this goal of status quo be achieved in 2021? Ambassador Sibal.
I'm very skeptical because China must have calculated its future moves when they decided to commit this aggression and violate all the previous agreements beginning from 1993 that they had with us about managing the border peacefully. Now, if they were to restore the status quo ante, which means withdraw from the positions from which they began their intrusions into across the line of actual control, then Xi Jinping would be asked the question, why did you do it? And what have you gained from this? You went in and you retreated. What has India given you in return? So it's a huge political problem for China. Not only that, it will damage Xi Jinping's and China's aura that has been created that China can get its way now because it is economically very strong and it can go ahead and achieve its ambitions without pushback, as has happened in the South China Sea. Now, if in this case they are actually pushed back, this is what status quo ante means, then the edifice that China has built up about its strength and its capacity to do as it wishes would collapse. So he can't afford that. There will be a serious international and domestic repercussion if that happened. Number three, actually the status quo ante is a halfway measure, which means we go back to the earlier situation where China can do what it wants. It can intrude when it pleases. It can put us under pressure when it thinks it's opportune to do so. How does that help us? I think there has to be a very important and departure from the previous situation where, at the very least, there should be a clarification of the line of actual control and a firm consensus that this cannot be breached. But China has refused that, and it's refusing that publicly even now. They don't want to clarify the line of actual control because they lose a very powerful instrument in their hands to keep pressure on India. Yes, status quo ante is desirable because from thereafter one can then begin to talk to China seriously about what next. But we can't do that unless they undo what they have done. So only in that context the status quo ante is desirable.
Right. Ambassador Prakash, we've been speaking to military officials and they say that we're not going to see China's next moves before April and May. We're only going to see the next episode of this border standoff in summer months. How do you think we can resolve this situation? It's a million-dollar question, very difficult to answer for a diplomat as well as a military official. What are India's options?
Parikshit, greetings and lovely being on the show with you. You know, the fact is that India has invested a lot of time, capital and effort in building the relations with China. Prime Minister Modi met President Xi Jinping 18 times. Twice he held informal summits. Now, after that, what China has done is a very serious betrayal of trust, and the trust deficit is not going to be bridged in a hurry. When we look ahead, we have to also see why China did what it did. And to me, the answer is pretty simple. They did because they think that they can. And China believes in comprehensive national power. They see the differential between India and China and believe that India is punching beyond its weight and needs to cut India to size. Now, given that kind of an attitude, and also the belief that they are destined to be the hegemon in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, it is very difficult. Diplomacy is an optimistic profession, and I wish I could have given an optimistic reply, but I cannot. And I do not see the contestation between India and China ending in a hurry. In fact, they are likely to dig in.
Right.
They will never concede a mistake. And as Ambassador Sybil said, their concept of an understanding is to meet each other halfway, which is to cede a part of what the gains they have taken so that they can come back again next year and do the same. So no, we are in for the long haul, and it's an uphill task.
It'll be an uphill task. Now let's focus on the other big theme of 2021, India-US relations under Joe Biden. Ambassador Shashank, if I can come to you, just to link it to the India-China theme, do you think there will be a convergence on how Joe Biden sees China and how India sees China right now? Do you think these countries will cooperate on their interests?
Well, there was an Asian joint vision which was developed between India and United States under the previous democratic administration. Since then, we have seen that the quad of 4 democratic countries has been strengthened. Recently, before he leaves office, President Trump has been giving special attention to the quad leaders. So therefore, we feel that perhaps quad will be further strengthened under President Biden. The second thing is that China would remain under pressure. I think they had started preparing themselves that there is a consensus emerging in the Washington strategic establishment to push China in a corner because Chinese had decided to overtake the Americans militarily, technically, scientifically. Americans are not willing to cede that space to China. So I think it's no longer the question only of China and India. Right. China perhaps will try to show a softer face towards India. We hope that they are able to do that so that we can really try for an Asian acting as the Asian engine for the economic growth for the world.
Right. Ambassador Sibal, two of India's important bilateral relationships are at stake here with Iran and with Russia. One on energy, one on defense. Do you think Joe Biden will relent when it comes to sanctions on these countries, make a reprieve, make an exception for India?
Question. Let me say a few words about the India-US relationship because that's very important. One is that we're going to have a transition period during which the Biden administration will try and put its house in order and consult through an interagency process because he's very process-oriented to see what part of Trump's policy they must discard because there's a lot of antipathy towards Trump, and what are those policies that must be retained. Number two, it is a democratic way of thinking that they would want to engage with China to find some via media on some issues on which they feel that they must have engagement with China. Now, whether in that process they make concessions to China can be very likely because the Chinese are reaching out to the United States in a very big way, hoping. See, for China, if the United States is willing to engage with China, it is a diplomatic victory because engagement means that China is not going to make any concessions. U.S. will have to make concessions, and that is a problem for us. With regard to the Quad and Indo-Pacific, some of the vocabulary that Biden has used is not very helpful. He's talked about the Asia-Pacific, whether it was a lapse, whether they'll come back to the Indo-Pacific. We'll wait and see, but I would like to go and answer your question with regard to Iran and Russia. I think Biden is going to be very tough with Russia, and the Russian leadership acknowledges that. Because they had made this hullabaloo about Russian interference in the election of Trump in the previous presidential election. And the U.S. Congress is very anti-Russian. They are the ones who passed CAATSA. Trump was not in favor. So I think there we're going to have a problem on how we manage our relations with Russia and isolate the relationship from U.S. pressures on Russia. And the S-400 issue will be a testing issue because they have now, as you know, sanctioned Turkey for having purchased the S-400.
Sanctioned Turkey.
And then we'll have a lot of lobbies in the United States which will be saying that if you're treating one of your allies in a particular way, why not India, which is not an ally? And is doing the same thing with Russia. So that will test our diplomatic mettle in the United States. With regard to Iran, yes, Biden has said that they'd like to re-enter the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement with Iran. But I think the whole situation has changed dramatically because Israel has it has made a huge advance, political and otherwise, and strategic in the Gulf. The Israel lobby is very strong. They're not going to let Biden do as he wants. And then Biden would like to introduce two things in negotiations with Iran, which Iran has rejected before. One is their missile program, other is their regional policy. On both these issues, Iran is not going to budge. They didn't budge even at the time of Obama. I can't see them doing under Biden. So I'm not very hopeful that we'll be able to, apart from Chabahar, be able to have an easier time with Iran. But I must say, and I'll end with that, I think the fact that our defense minister and EAM went to Tehran on the way to SCO in Moscow was a very good strategic step.
Okay, so there will be very few changes as far as U.S. policy towards Iran and Russia goes. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we'll go to Ambassador Vishnu Prakash about H1B, about restoration of GSP benefits and trade partnerships with the United States as well. Don't go anywhere. This discussion on India's foreign policy priorities in 2021 continues on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. We still have with us former Foreign Secretary Shashank and Kanwal Sibal, as well as former Indian Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, if I can come to you, do you think we can hope for a overturning of Trump-era policies on H1B? And do you think India should try and continue the momentum on that early trade deal with the United States? Do you think this will be advantageous to India in the current atmosphere?
Oh, certainly it will be. One less irritant will certainly help. Although there is an extraordinary convergence of interests and cooperation between the two countries, yet trade is an irritant. And as far as I know, we are quite close to doing the deal. And it will certainly help if we get it out of the way. That will be a good start to the relationship. So that is one. As far as H1B is concerned, already there are indications that there would be reconsideration for the simple reason that H1B visas help both countries. I mean, sure, India gets the lion's share of the H1B visas, but what happens in the bargain? What happens in the bargain is that Indian experts, highly technical, skilled personnel, lend a competitive edge to American companies and American businesses. That is one. And competition is the name of the game. And two, there is job creation. So it works both ways, it benefits both ways. And I am hopeful that these two issues will be put behind us sooner than later.
Right. Ambassador Sibal, if I could ask you about India's trade agreements. We've negotiated some trade deals for a very long time. We've been discussing an Indo-US FTA for years now. Indo-EU trade negotiations went on for over 10 to 12 years. Do you think 2021 should be the time when India should see certain trade partnerships or even limited trade deals, be it with the UK, be it with the EU, or be it with the United States, Argentina, Brazil?
Well, with regard to the United States, Biden has been making statements that he'll be in no hurry to enter into free trade agreements or trade agreements with any country, because he will like to make an assessment of how these agreements have helped or not helped the American economy. So we'll have an interregnum during which the Biden administration would be formulating his thinking. Secondly, after having walked out of the RCEP, it's clear that India has a certain view on future FTAs, and will look extremely closely as to what advantages will accrue to India from such FTAs. Yes, now that we've walked out from the RCEP, it makes sense to have an FTA or accelerate the FTA with the European Union. But that's not going to be easy because the European Union has been dragging its feet. Of course, it has signed an agreement with Japan, and it should see in its interest to sign an agreement with India. But there are past issues which will need to be overcome, and we have to see. I don't think the negotiations have taken off in any serious way. With the UK would be deeply interested in a sort of an FTA with India, but it has to be a limited FTA. Partly, of course, it all will depend on what kind of an agreement Britain has with the EU, whether it's a no-deal exit, or if Brexit, even if there's a deal, what are the elements of the deal? That will condition the prospects of a deal with the UK. As you know, when Dominic Raab, their foreign secretary, came here, it was agreed that we will have a 10-year forward-looking plan with the UK. But I would recommend a much more limited FTA trade agreement with the UK, which singles out 3, 4, 5 priority areas on both sides. And there should be an agreement on that. That will be much easier to accomplish. With the United States, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Okay.
Very difficult because, you know, when the TPP was discussed, it was too much of an ambitious agreement even for us. So I can't see America handing over something to you which is less than the TPP. And for the others, Argentina and others, I think we'll have to then review our policies regarding FTAs. It's not going to be for tomorrow.
Right, it's not going to be for tomorrow, and India has been saying that 2021 will be a year when they would like to boost exports under Atmanirbhar Bharat. They're not looking inwards, but they want to play a bigger role in global supply chains. But let me get in Ambassador Shashank now. Ambassador Shashank, our final theme for today would be India and the neighborhood. Do you think we need to focus more on the neighborhood, considering China's development aid loans to the region as well? Do you think our neighborhood policy needs revisiting?
Well, firstly, China has made deep inroads into our neighborhood and into many other developing countries in Asia and Africa. So China will find that there would be domestic protests against the way Chinese have been picking up debt for equity or equity for debt in these countries, picking up land parcels. So I think India can have only greater access to these countries to the extent that there is a domestic consensus developing against China. Otherwise, Chinese have deep pockets. Indians don't have those kind of pockets. India can, of course, offer a democratic alternative to them. Secondly, India says that it will not be a security concern to them in any manner, and it will go by what are the priorities set up by the neighboring countries. So India normally supports those areas, so long as they are not inimical to the India's interests. But Chinese have been going all out to woo the neighboring countries by giving very, very lucrative deals to them, especially with the governments. So therefore, we have to keep this in mind that India will have to fulfill all the promises that we make to the neighboring countries in good time, because our projects have been getting delayed for a very long time. So we need to move faster on them.
All right, we need to move faster with our development aid initiatives in the neighborhood. We've completely run out of time on Global Eye today, but I'd like to thank all our guests for joining us today. Ambassador Shashank, Ambassador Kamal Sibal, and Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we ran out of time, but it was a great discussion right here on Global Eye. Thanks for watching.